This is the Pam Souter Podcast. With over 2 decades of field and corporate experience and voted one of the most influential women in direct selling, Pam helps mesh the daily needs of distributors to everyday life challenges. It's time to get over yourself, fire up your productivity, work less, and live more. Learn the self-limiting hashtag F-bombs holding you back, fear, frustration, and failures, and turn those F-bombs into friendships, fun, and freedom. Ready? Let's get this party started.
So now what? It's 1995, and I've got my why, and it is huge. I want to be able to continue to be a stay-at-home mom with my kids who are now the ages of 7 and 10. So I got up and I started asking. Really asking people. So what does that mean? Well, I made a list. I made a long list of everybody that I knew, and the hardest part was not prejudging who they were and what they did, where they came from, how far away they lived, whether they were a great friend or just a friend by chance. They went to the kids' school, whatever. I just didn't prejudge them. I just started making a list. And, one of the best things I heard to do was go through the alphabet. So I started with A and went all the way through, such as who's my accountant, who is our attorney, and then just kept going. So I made that strong list. And then I went to Dave and I said, all right, now who do you know that we could invite over to the house for an opportunity meeting? And so that's what we did. We made a list of people that we felt would come. Again, we didn't prejudge. I just thought, look, nobody thought I might be interested in this, so I don't know if they would be interested or not. And we even invited his aunt, who happened to be the first distributor that I ever got, and that was pretty cool. So they came over, and I made iced tea. We do that in the South, and homemade cookies, and they all loved that. Now, let me tell you, I was so nervous. I had this huge old-fashioned flip chart that I purchased to give the business presentation. I set it up in our den, and our den at that time probably seated maximum like 15 people, and that was crowded. But I set up chairs, I got prepared, and honestly, right before the time, which was 7 p.m. that night that I invited everybody, I got so sick that I actually threw up. I'm like, I don't think that I can do this. And I got really, really nervous. I almost called it off. And my sponsor was supposed to come down and help me. And he called at the last minute and said he couldn't come and that I would have to do it, which scared me to death because I didn't really know what I was doing. And it was probably the best thing that he could have done is not show up. So I made it through it. The doorbell rang. People came in. They're friends, they're family. They were just being sweet. And they showed up. And I stood in that room and I started flipping through that flip chart. And I just read the words right off the flip chart. I didn't add anything really to it because I didn't know what to add or what to take out. And we got through it pretty quickly. And then we served tea and cookies. And everybody hung out and we talked about it. And Dave's aunt Marcina, she signed up. And that was my first distributor back in 1995. And I felt so good about that. I was off and running after that. So what did I do the next day? Everybody always wants to know, what's a day like? What's a day like? Well, it starts out pretty typical when you have family. You get the kids up, you get them ready for school, they take off. I did a little bit of housework. I went to the gym, and I started talking to people at the gym. I started saying, hey, have you heard of this? Have you heard of this company or this service? Because it was a service-based company back then. And I started asking again at the gym. And then afterwards, I went to the coffee shop and I saw a couple people there and I asked them. And the next thing you know, I'm asking more. I asked Dave's aunt Marcina if she'd have a meeting at her house, which she did, which was crazy. And she had people come over. And I can't honestly remember if anybody signed up, but I just started doing in-house meetings and they just started taking off. Not really quickly in the beginning, but they started taking off to where I was doing about a meeting a week. And I was doing a lot of phone work at night, once the kids left and I went to the gym and came home and had something to eat. I'd made a few phone calls during the afternoon. Then, of course, the kids get off the bus and I'm back on mom duty until about 9 o'clock at night. And that's when I could do some follow up. And that's what I did. And I did that consistently every single day. And I'll never forget getting that first check. And that first check was $15.78. And I did a lot of work for that first check. But what it showed me was that this company pays. It's actually real. And back in the day, you didn't have anything computerized. You got a printout in the mail well after all the work had been done. It was actually like the following month, 3-4 weeks into the month. And you saw the customers that were there, whether they were still active, any distributors, whether they were still active. And so that printout was almost over before you even got it. But it did track my business for me. I kind of knew where I was headed and that it was in the right direction because every month that paperwork got bigger. There were more lines on it. And then it went from one page to another page and to a third page and a fourth. And every time the pages increased, my check increased. And so I just kept working. I didn't know what else to do. I had been in sales before, and I never liked that word, being in sales or being a salesperson. So I decided not to go down that path in my brain, and I just wanted to be somebody that shared an opportunity, shared a great service, and I didn't take those no's personally. And I learned that a long time ago. Whether I'm asking people to help me with a project for the PTA or for church, a lot of people say no, even on projects like that they're members of that congregation or members of that school, but they still say, nope, not interested. Nope, don't have time. No, that's not, I'm working over here doing this. So I was used to it. It's not unusual, and we take everything so personally when really it's wherever they're at and the way that they're coming to us and what's going on within their lives at that moment that you ask whether or not they're in transition. And that was, I think, the biggest thing for me to understand is they're not making fun of me. They're not laughing at me. And if they are, well, that's their deal. That has nothing to do with me. I was serious. I was serious about making this work. I was so serious that I actually became too serious and didn't started taking the fun out. And when I started taking the fun out, I realized I needed to put the fun back in because after all, that's what we're all after. We're after joy. We're after happiness. And so I just started growing. The business started growing. I started meeting people all over the town of, this was back in Virginia at the time, in different parts of the city. I met people from all walks of life. I had everybody from housewives to business owners to pilots to nurses to teachers to principals. I had all kinds of people in my business. So once again, I understood, don't prejudge. You never know who's going to join. And I just kept going. And what do I mean by that? I just kept asking. And, along the way, people would say yes, people would say no, and people would join and people would quit. And I think for me, the hardest part were the ones that gave up really, really early. They gave up. They stopped working their business because they got a no or because they didn't have their why strong enough. And so I learned some valuable tips along the way on how to keep people engaged so that at least we could gather up their list of names and start contacting them. So if they flaked out on me or the business and they quit, I at least had some contacts of theirs that I could use as referrals, something like that. And I didn't allow myself to get too disappointed in that. I knew that if I remained focused, if I had that strong why backing me up every single day, and I could see that in the forefront of me, that I could keep going. And another thing, I was just so darn excited. I never understood the industry of network marketing direct sales before. I didn't even know it existed. And I didn't realize that people were really making some big money out there and that there were endless possibilities. And I wanted to be a part of that. I was never afraid of making money. I would work really, really hard throughout my career, whether it was waiting tables back in college to getting out of school. Ended up selling computers in the 80s. I wasn't afraid of straight commissions. I was probably the only person that was given the straight commission opportunity back at that job because I wanted to be able to make unlimited income. And so what I learned, I needed to keep it really, really simple for everyone else because not everyone else understood that, nor did everyone else understand that they could go beyond maybe 200 or 300 extra in a side business. Most people were just after that. And if I talked big money, I would lose them. Because let's face it, only 1% of the population makes over six figures annually. So why are we talking about that monthly? They can't even fathom it. So I started to understand to keep it really, really simple, allow them to tell me the dollar amount that they were looking at and respecting that. That was really, really important, respecting that, not trying to talk them in to, hey, you can make more than that, you can make more than that, because they weren't there yet in their mind. So I really started to understand that and appreciate that. And then the most important thing was this statement here, and it's really important that we all understand that just because it works, does it duplicate? Now, I'd heard that over and over again. Just because it works, does it duplicate? Now, I'll give you a great story. I would be at a coffee shop with a big, thick binder, and in that binder were laminated opportunity pages, and I knew them inside and out. And I could go through that opportunity by memorization, and I would flip the pages. I would go really fast, and I would be like on target, the best business presentation I could possibly give. You just got it. I talked about myself all the way through. Well, at the end of it, I'm like, why isn't everybody signing up? No one signed up. And I realized, well, this is working. I'm getting them there. They're listening to it. But what's happening here at the end? And so I soon started asking questions. I said, let me ask you, you said you wanted to meet here. You said you were interested in the opportunity. So what happened? Why do you no longer have an interest? Most of the time they said, well, I just don't think I can do it. I'm just not like you. So I realized I was overcomplicating it. I was being too good at the business presentation, and I wasn't asking them what they want enough all the way through. So I pretty much got rid of the binder. I had a few pieces of paper in front of me. Again, I wanted it to work. I wanted everybody that I sat down with to understand that they could do it too. So I would sit down with them. I would write down why they were meeting with me, and I would really get them engaged in those questions. Like, so why are you here? And if they would say something like, I want to spend more time with my kids. Why? Why is that important to you? Well, I just don't get to see them enough. Well, how come you don't get to see them enough? Well, I don't get to see them enough because I'm working 40, 50 hours a week. So how do you feel like you can eliminate some of those hours? What do you need to do to be able to do that? And so we would just go deeper and deeper and deeper into that why. And I would write all of that down and keep that in a file, because then when they started to maybe get discouraged or thinking about leaving or getting their fifth no and they don't know how to take it, I could go back to, this is why you said you wanted to do this. Let's focus on that. Let's continue asking. And so I would get their why, get it really strong, write it down, and then I would tailor that presentation very quickly around their why. And I would say, we've got an opportunity here. This is what it cost to become a part of it. Kept that really simple. Each month, this is your obligation to keep your business up and running. These are the first steps that we're going to take. We're going to acquire some customers. and we're going to get that done right away. And I'm going to be here with you. I'm going to hold your hand throughout the entire process. You're not going to have to think. You're going to watch. You're going to listen. And I'm going to guide you. And then we're going to start building your business. And I kept it that simple. And throughout that creative process, I started to understand what they meant by keeping it simple, by duplicating, and by understanding that that was the most important part of the business, but also that no matter who I sat down with, it was the same scenario. There were no options in there, no variables, so that they felt like they could absolutely do it with me. And it just became a duplicating machine. And one of the other things that I did pretty early on that really started to work for me, we had, back in the day, you had VHS tapes. And there was a meeting that I had attended where the top money earner had it videotaped. And so you could buy those tapes. So that's what I did. I bought tapes, and then he didn't care if you duplicated them. So I had 2 VHS machines set up, and I duplicated those tapes. But what I did is every single person that signed up with me, personally signed up, I would give them 10 VHS tapes, and I would tell them, go drop them off. Let's start making your list. Let's go to the top 10 and let's just ride together. And I would ride with them because I knew if I didn't, they probably wouldn't drop them off. They get too scared. And so I would have them in the car with me. I would just tell them, go to the front door, just knock on the door and have them listen to the tape. And if they weren't there, we might put a Post-it note on it and leave it, or we might go back later. And 9 times out of 10, they would not listen to it. However, it created enough curiosity that they would at least let us come back over and do a business presentation. And then we would, let's say they did listen or didn't listen, we'd go back by, we'd pick that tape back up because we wanted to keep it out there and maybe give it to that next person. And then what they would do, once they signed someone up, they would make 10 copies or have 10 copies made, and they would duplicate that process. And it just became a duplicating machine. And that's what you want to implement in your business today. And through social media, we can do that through Zooms, through other types of technology. But you want to take yourself out of the picture as much as you can and allow everyone else to implement their own personalities within whatever they do, but also really create that duplicatable system that everyone feels like they can do too. They don't have to be an expert. They can get started today and start building their business right now without having to have any knowledge of the true background of it. But they can keep it building and growing all along the way, whether they're actively involved or not. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Pam Souter Podcast. Be sure to check out my website at pamsouter.com. There you can get inspired, listen to more podcasts, read and submit Ask Pam questions that could be featured on an upcoming podcast episode. Be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. And as always, much love and appreciation.